Okay, so I want to begin by asking you all a few questions. The first being, how many of you were born in a country other than the United States? Okay, so a few of you. How many of you have parents or grandparents that were born in another country? Okay, and how many of you at least know someone who was born in a country other than the United States? Okay, thank you. So it seems as though almost every single person in this room has some sort of connection to an immigrant and can somewhat understand what it might feel like to be an outsider. Personally, I am the daughter of two immigrants. My parents are right there in the crowd, and they were both born in Lebanon. We come from a small village in Lebanon called Ghazi in Bekaa Valley. For those of you who don't know, Lebanon is an extremely tiny, extremely poor country in the Middle East, and it borders Syria. To give you an idea of just how small Lebanon really is, in terms of its population size, the state of Ohio has a population of about 12 million, whereas Lebanon has a population of about 6 million. So the state of Ohio alone is almost double the population of Lebanon. In terms of its physical size, Lebanon is about 4,000 miles squared, and Lake Erie is about 10,000 miles squared. So here's a little visual of Lebanon over our area. So while that's pretty interesting, I'm not here to talk to you about the size of Lebanon. I do want to talk to you all about a specific aspect of Lebanon, though, and that is its population of refugees. Lebanon has a very small population, and yet 1/4 of it is made up of refugees. According to the UNHCR, there are over 1 million Syrian refugees registered in Lebanon today. And I have personally seen our small village of Ghazi grow so much over the last few years since the start of the war because of how many refugees have come in. It only makes sense because the area where my family is from is only about a 15-minute drive from the Syrian border. But what's even more shocking than seeing such a small village grow so much in such a short period of time is the fact that in 2006, when I was only 6 years old, my own family had to flee from Lebanon because of war. There was a war going on at the time involving Israel and Hezbollah. For those who are unaware, Hezbollah is a terrorist group that was formed in 1982 in response to an Israeli invasion of Lebanon. And so the war is fittingly called the 2006 Israel-Hezbollah War, or the 2006 Lebanon War. My family had to spend 1 or 2 weeks sleeping in my grandmother's basement. That provided some protection, obviously, because it's underground, but that just was not safe enough. We ended up having to flee, and so we left Ghazi, and so those are images from the war. And we left Ghazi, and we journeyed through Syria until we reached Jordan. So the fact that my family once had to flee our village because of war, and now people are seeking refuge in our village because of war, is crazy to think about, and I greatly attribute this experience to why I am so invested and passionate in helping refugees today, both in my own community and internationally. So there are a lot of Syrian refugees in Lebanon. However, that number is only a small percentage of how many refugees there are around the entire world. According to the United Nations, there are around 11 million Syrians fleeing war today. That's enough people to fill roughly 200 Yankee stadiums. And I'm sure you are all wondering, if you haven't looked into the issue or kept up on it at all, just as I did, why are these people displaced and what's even going on? Well, in 2011, what is known as the Arab Spring toppled the regimes of Tunisia and Egypt. In March of that year, it began in Syria, and it is what continues to plague the country today. However, the issue has only become far more complicated. During that time, a group of teenage boys were arrested and tortured for anti-government graffiti. The people were outraged, as one was also killed as a result. The people of Syria responded through nonviolent governmental protests, also protesting lack of freedom and governmental economic issues. The regime responded, however, with force, and they detained and killed many demonstrators. This is ultimately what sparked the conflict that continues to plague the country 6 years later. So this conflict is really difficult to comprehend at times. So let's start with Syria itself and learning more about it itself as a country. So Syria is a small country in the Middle East bordered by Jordan, Iraq, Turkey, and Lebanon. Its people are of many different ethnicities, speak many different languages, and practice many different religions. Although about 90% of the population are Arab, there are many minorities whose religions all vary greatly. About 74% of the population are practicing Sunni Muslims. However, other religions include Christianity, Shia, and Alawite. The people also speak many different languages. The official language is Arabic. However, they speak Armenian, Aramaic, Circassian, French, and English as well. And so the people of Syria are extremely diverse. And while the country today is extremely divided, it wasn't always like this. I'm currently reading a book called Among the Ruins, Syria, Past and Present by historian and research fellow Christian Sahner. In it, Sahner writes about the religious history of Syria going as far back as ancient times. And Sahner writes that Syria was once known as a country in which Muslims and Christians lived together in peace. And so there was this beautiful coexistence among members of different religions and communities that leaves many, including myself, wondering what happened. So today, the Syrian conflict is extremely difficult to comprehend. However, one of the biggest misconceptions that is so important to understand is that the Syrian conflict is not a civil war, no matter how many times it is referred to as one. The Syrian conflict is not an internal conflict. According to Alson Gunner, a New York-based geopolitical analyst, for those who have been trying to make sense of the Syrian civil war since 2011 with little luck, the explanation is simple. It isn't a civil war, and it never was. Understanding it as a proxy conflict from the very beginning will aid one immeasurably in understanding what the obvious solutions are, but only when they come to this understanding. While I'm not going to stand up here and tell you all that there are blatantly obvious solutions to the greatest humanitarian crisis of our time, I think this quote does a great job at illustrating the significance of foreign involvement in the Syrian crisis. Involvement from countries such as the US, Russia, and Turkey have only continued to fuel the conflict. In a civil war, usually there are two sides, and the war will end when one of the sides either surrenders or is too exhausted to continue fighting. However, not only are there more than two sides to this conflict, but even if we were to extremely simplify it and look at it as just a war between the regime and the people, both sides are backed up by so many different forces that the war will never truly end if it keeps on going that way. And so another big misconception with this issue is that it's not our problem, but it is. According to the UN, 11 million people are fleeing war. That is not to mention that there have been over 500,000 reported deaths, 1.5 million reported injuries, and about 3 million children are not attending school. Half of the Syrian population is no longer has a home. I'm sure you have all seen the image of this little boy who fled Syria with his family by boat, and he ended up washing up on shore. It went viral a little while ago. I have personally seen the refugees in Lebanon live in absolutely miserable conditions, in tents, in mud, with nothing, not even bare necessities. Nobody flees the home that they love just to flee and to risk their lives. They do it because they don't have a choice. And this issue even extends to our own community. The Syrian conflict is obviously a global issue, and I think it's much easier to say that it's not our problem than to really face the fact that millions of people are dying and we are doing absolutely nothing about it. And so if you were to all take away one thing from this presentation, I urge you all to realize how truly global the Syrian conflict is and how there are so many ways to help out even in our own community. One of my favorite poets, named Warsan Shire, once wrote, "Apathy is the same as war. It all kills you." And so I urge you all, do not be apathetic, but show care and concern, because we are all human. Thank you.